Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Let's Dev, where our Plants vs. Zombies journey continues down yet another unexpected path. To quickly summarize, we recently began work on a new idea inspired by Plants vs. Zombies. However, due to some complicated math, we hit a wall that would require off-video tinkering before we could continue. And well, the short version is that plans have changed. So while I rethink a few things in Plant vs. Zombies, I thought we'd work on a mini Plant vs. Zombies project in the meantime. And by mini, I literally mean mini. The plan will be to create a simple mini version of Plants vs. Zombies. And this project will be comprised of different parts from all of our previous attempts. It will also be powered using structs so that I can practice using structs, and we'll also try doing it in as few objects as possible. And so to start, we'll be focusing on the plants and the systems based around them. I should also note that this is a minor sub-project of sorts, so please do not expect a full complete remake. But with that said, let's get to the coding. And first up was creating a grid for our play area. Each cell in the grid was then filled with a value of 0. Next, a constructor for our plants was created. Variables for the struct include object ID, type, coordinates, and others will need to control plant behaviors. With that done, we needed a sprite, so a tiny little pea shooter sprite was doodled up. And yes, that is a 4x4 size sprite. Now back in the code, a left click check was made, and like we've done before, a plant object would be created in the corresponding cell nearest to the mouse's position. The cell was also marked as occupied in our play area grid, and a new struct would be created for that plant object. And finally, restrictions were added to prevent plants from being placed outside the play area. Just like that, we were able to place plants just like in Plants vs. Zombies. Now, the plan for this project is to build a Frankenstein of parts that worked in previous projects, so the only reason we're using objects here are for their built-in collision properties. Everything else will be handled through these structs and a ticker. But before we could get to that ticker, we needed a projectile, so one was doodled. And aside from the movement variables, we'd also add a function so we could pool our projectiles. And yes, this is indeed the same pooling system we created in our Color Murray project. So with our pooling system set up, it was time to start on the ticker. First, projectiles would move in their set direction. Next, a loop was created to iterate through our list of plants currently on the grid. Using the timer variable and a temporary threshold of 60 frames, I had each plant pop the projectile stack once their timer reached the threshold. In other words, plants now fire projectiles based on their individual cooldown timers. The math took some getting used to, mostly because I've never made such a tiny project before, but eventually we now had plants who would fire projectiles based on their own independent timers. And already you can see the merging of multiple projects, the grid handling from more current projects, the use of objects like older projects, and the usage of lists, structs, and other tools under the hood. It's a wonderful smorgasbord of ideas coming together under one single beautiful mess of pixels. And with that done, we were almost complete on the basics for plants. All we needed to do was create a proper destruction system. So back in the code, a hurt boolean and hurt timer were added to the plant constructor. And because we're using objects for our plants, the hurt plant function would simply check the list of plants for the proper ID and remove 1 point from its health value. And if the plant's health has reached 0, the plant object is destroyed, the struct is removed, and the grid cell is reset to 0. Else, the plant is placed into a hurt cooldown state, which is then ticked through much like the plant's attack timer. With that done, another function was created to return the plant's ID based on X and Y arguments. In this case, the mouse's position. Much like the ID check, this function checks for the X and Y coordinates and returns the plant ID found in said position. And while it may not seem like it at first, as I continue to right-click on these plants, they are slowly losing health. And much like our code is set to do, all plants with 0 remaining health are removed from the play area and the list of plants. Which means we now have just about everything we'll need for our plants going forward. And fingers crossed that the rest of the melding of previous works goes just as smoothly. Anyway, with that brings us to the end of today's episode of Let's Dev. So leave a like if you enjoyed the episode, subscribe and turn on notifications if you haven't already, and be sure to leave your thoughts on our progress in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.